Rabbi Soloveitchik tells us the Jews have 2 degrees of sanctity, each one grounded in a separate covenant. There is the covenant at Sinai, and then there's the covenant described in this week's Parsha Tzvi at the end of Moshe's life. The covenant at Sinai was made with those Jews who were present there at that great moment, and it represents the individual sanctity of every Jew. The covenant at Nitzavim, at the end of Moshe's life, near the spot of sort of Moshe's farewell address, includes all Jews, those who are there living and those who are yet to be born and yet to join the Jewish people. That is the sanctity of our heritage, of our connection with our ancestors and our forefathers. And Jews then have this double sanctity, the individual one and the one that's connected to our forefathers and our heritage. Now, with regard to converts, it's pretty clear how the convert can acquire individual sanctity by taking upon his or herself the Torah, the commandments. You become exactly like anyone else on the individual level. But how can one take upon oneself an ancestry, a sort of genealogy, a connection to a tradition which has been living now for thousands of years and you've just joined? It's a question, but it's clear that this is what the Torah has in mind, because in this second covenant, described in Parashat Nitzavim, the Torah says explicitly, "V'gercha asher b'kerev machanecha," the convert was within your camp. How can this be? How does this work? To be more specific, Jewish prayer includes formulas such as Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, God, our God and the God of our forefathers. How can a convert say that when that convert's forefathers were not Jews, were not worshiping the one God identified in the Jewish faith? Well, this is actually not a new question. It was taken up by Chazal thousands of years ago, and the answer is pretty clear, because we are all descendants of Avraham, of Abraham, of Hamon Goyim. And here's a really important point which should be made. We are not, I don't think any Jews can show or could be even thought to be actual biological linear descendants of Avraham. Avraham himself converted many people, and throughout the ages, many other people from other Jews, other nations have joined the Jewish people. And Avram's greatness was not in founding some sort of clan of his biological descendants. It was in spreading the knowledge and the worship of the one God. And anyone who was convinced by Abraham and joined his community based on moral law, on restraints on personal behavior, and all in view of our surrender before the one and true God, are equally Jews. And so, in that sense, even a convert can say Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Olei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Olei Yaakov, and that statement actually applies pretty much in the same way to all Jews, whether born Jewish or converted. Now, this ruling that converts can say, like any other Jew, our God and the God of our forefathers, is universally accepted. Even those who are in the jargon or the unfortunate wording of some of the media, ultra Orthodox Jews, don't dispute it. There were, however, dissenting opinions a long time ago. The Mishnah in Bikurim actually preserves, for whatever reason, I can't understand why, inserts in the Mishnah the view which was rejected, which limited the ability of converts to say this. Converts were not supposed to recite the formula that the person who brought the first fruits to the temple would say, because it referred to our forefathers, our ancestors. But again, this view, even though it's in the Mishnah, is rejected by the Yerushalmi. There is no Bavli on the Bikurim. It's rejected by the Yerushalmi, both in theory and in practice. There was a Ma'aseh Shahaya where one of the rabbis instructed a convert to say Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu. Now, much of what I've said here is said very forcefully and explicated in detail by Moses Maimonides in a letter which he wrote to a certain convert, proselyte by the name of Obadiah. This should not be confused with an earlier convert by the name of Obadiah, who was a Norman from southern Italy, a Christian, who was very important for introducing musical notation and whatnot. This man was almost certainly a Muslim, because as in the third part of the letter, Maimonides offers his emotional support and doctrinal support to this man. Apparently, this Obadiah was converted by a rabbi who, in the process of conversion, or denigrated Islam and told him that Islam is a sort of a pagan religion, and that they do all sorts of pagan practices. And Maimonides, who knew the Islamic creeds and the Islamic literature very well, told him that this is absolutely wrong, that Muslims worship the one and true God, and that this rabbi was wrong, not just in his presentation of Islam, but in particular, it's a very grievous sin in Judaism to put down, to insult the convert. We are instructed to love the convert, to offer them support, and to denigrate them, even if there were reasons to do so, if they were converting from some really pagan religion, is absolutely unacceptable. In this letter, Maimonides goes to great length describing the great accomplishments of Abraham, Avram Avinu, who was a man who introduced monotheism into the world, discovered God on his own, through the dint of his own thinking and critical thinking and courage, and eventually was rewarded with prophecy and spread monotheism and built a community which evolved into the Jewish people. That we speak today about Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Not everyone is happy with that designation. Sometimes it seems anachronous, seems inappropriate, inaccurate. But I think with regard to Maimonides, it's actually quite spot on. Maimonides, in the guide, in this letter to Obadiah the proselyte, and the Mishnah Torah, really makes the point of how Abraham got things started, building a community, setting guidelines, people who were interested, who were committed to derech Hashem, to the way of God. And this eventually, again, evolved into the Jewish community, and many generations after Abraham, we received the divine code, the Torah. But we're still, all in all, the spiritual descendants of Abraham, who really brought this great blessing to the world. And in this sense, particularly taking into account the fact emphasized by Maimonides that in Egypt, before Moses, working on, of course, as God's messenger, took the Jews out of Egypt, the community that Abraham had nearly been swallowed up in the flesh pots of Egypt. We're really all, in one sense, converts. There's the event at Sinai. All Jewish commentators regard it as a sort of conversion cemetery, as a conversion ceremony with, the changing of clothes and all sorts of restraints. So this is something that should be explored in depth on some other occasion. So to sum up, at this momentous occasion at the end of Moses' life, where he addressed himself to all Jews, present and future, including V'gercha shebekerev machanecha, including the proselytes then and those who will be added to the Jewish people whenever and in the course of time, we see how the Jewish community is defined by its values and its commitment to the Torah. And of course, you can't just feel Jewish if you're not born into a Jewish family. You have to undergo a conversion ceremony or a conversion ritual after the necessary study. But all in all, we're a community based on values, and in particular, I say this because I'm extremely unhappy with the current trend to Jewish genealogy and trying to identify certain Jewish DNA. This is something which I think is wrong-headed, and it serves the purpose of those who would try and speak of a Jewish race, which is something that has to be avoided at all costs. So let's just leave it at that. That the covenant that seals our sanctity as a people, our sanctity that derives from our adhesion and our connection to our ancestors, applies to all Jews, born Jewish or converted to Judaism, because it all derives from Avraham Avinu, Abraham, who introduced monotheism into the world. Thank you very much. And Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova.